Come here. Come here, sweetie. He Shredder
Is
is
this your
very
wombat?
jealous. Every time I talk, my wombat. Yeah, get over here, wombat. This boy is very jealous every time I do this, every time I talk to a client, every time I get on and talk to somebody like you. And what he's about to do, because he's a
Mm.
bad boy, is as soon as I let him down, he's going to go and use the litter box because he knows that I will be forced to get up because he refuses to cover after he uses the litter box because he's a boy.
Yeah.
So he just he does it deliberately so that I'll have to smell it
Nice.
because he's a shit, isn't he?
He's a
Aren't you,
shit
Shredder?
kitty. Shitty kitty. Shitting kitties. Ooh. So, how's your work doing? You seem in a good spot. Your vibe, your aura.
My vibe, my aura. Yeah, well, you know, yeah, I'm sort of discombobulated this past week. Just my schedule's been sort of crazy, but
Yeah.
yeah, enjoying the show. Looking forward to expanding it soon. We ran
Ooh.
into another round of tech problems with new internet service last week, so
Mm. Mm.
we've got this whole studio, big studio, control room, and everything built into my house, and
Oh.
can't use it. So until we get tech people out here from another internet company, that's good.
Goodness.
Writing is good. Yeah, things are normal.
Normal. That's good. It's good to have a normal.
Yeah, normal is good.
That's a normal thing. I've been
I mean,
fascinated.
for
What?
me, but I mean, people are still losing their minds in society, obviously.
Are they?
It doesn't seem that way to you then. Okay.
I don't know. I get on Facebook and my boomer relations are doing weird things with Trump, but it's mostly harmless. I guess there's protests of Elon Musk that are astroturfed.
I guess.
The trans stuff is kind of taking a turn.
It's yeah. Well, like around here, around Vermont, and I'm sure the same is true in Washington. th- every other day, there's some announcement in some local weekly paper or I mean online, obviously,
Yeah.
about some protest that's going to happen at some place. They're protesting Trump, but I literally don't know what specifically they're. Well, they're not actually. They're not actually specifically protesting anything. They are, in fact, protesting Trump, the man, the personality. I mean, they just can't stand him. So it doesn't have to be specific. They just have to protest him. And apparently they're also protesting Elon, although over what, I don't know. Some of these people appear to have been convinced that he's going to take their Social Security. I don't know why they've been convinced of that, but they apparently do believe it. Um, and of course, we've got the spectacle of Democrat politicians and their constituents literally falling in love with illegal aliens who are in gangs and loving them so much that they get on a plane to go to El Salvador to have a nice little check-in over bottled water. I mean, I that is this the real world?
It's a stunt world. Don't you think? Is there like sincerity in that? I mean,
No, there isn't.
from the politicians, I'm sure that the people that are the boomers on Facebook are really concerned about, these undocumented immigrants not receiving due process. Although they didn't receive due process to get in here, they should definitely receive due process to be
Yeah, of course.
vacated.
It just see that's the thing. Yeah, it's a stunt world, but I don't want us. That's not an excuse. I know you're
Okay.
not using it as an excuse, but a lot of people say, well, that's just how it is now. No, no, that's not just how it is now.
Yeah.
We can make a choice. I'm saying we should make a choice so that it's not just like this now. We don't have to. We're not all being. I mean, it feels this way. Of course, to most people, you feel as though you're being swept along with a current. but that current is made up of all of us. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to sound profound or anything, but
No.
this is not a force of nature. In a way it is. I mean, crowds get whipped up with madness and the fever has to break at a certain point. I understand that. But it's like when I talk about, I'm gonna write about this for my column for the Blaze this week, about the cultural and technological, to me, obvious conscious project at this point to stop us from communicating with each other, to force us to communicate only with screens. They're getting rid of cashiers in grocery stores. I was at a place yesterday that had a self-checkout in not one but two places within the store. Not only was I not allowed to order my sandwich by speaking to the human behind the sandwich counter, you're not allowed to. They will not take your order. You have to tap it in on an iPad. And then you have to go up to the front with your stuff, ring your stuff up, and pay for yourself while, an 18-year-old kid stands in front of the cigarette display case like this. We don't have to. This isn't just happening. People are making it happen. I want us to wake up and say, this is not the society that I choose, and we're not going to do this anymore.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, what are ways in which you think there's best to counter this? Is this just a small acts of defiance, saying, no, I'm going to pay with cash?
Well, those are tools available, and I hope more people will do them. I don't actually know. The only thing I know is it has to start with noticing it, talking about it out loud, talking about it with other people, trying to persuade them, that there's value in a world where we communicate with each other, where humans interact with humans, and that we don't simply follow the velvet rope just because corporations want us to do that.
Yeah. Well, unless we're raiding the Capitol, then of course we'll just follow that.
Right. And for that, we should, of course, be summarily executed.
Well, there's got to be some due process somewhere. If not for us, then at least for those aliens.
I mean, so I'm thinking through the question that you're asking. So what should we do? Like, I'm trying to think through it in this scenario that I just told an anecdote about. It's one, I don't know what you call them anymore. I used to call them convenience stores and gas stations, but they're more than that now. This is there's a chain of them called Maple Fields here in Vermont, which is really, it's just really stupid.
It's like
they're trying.
What's the colloquial term for your area of the world? It's like there's Texans and then your northeastern
Yankees.
Yankee, yeah, it's like a Yankee Buc-ee's then.
Yeah. Yes. It's that kind of thing, right? Not nearly as
ostentatious,
not nearly as voluminous as a Buc-ee's, but yeah, you go in there and of course there's all the snack food. This thing is built on the side of the highway. I say the highway because I do live in a rural state and we have one. It's built on the side of a highway, and it has like 16 bays for gasoline and a separate bay for tractor trailers with diesel. So it is a truck stop in a way. And you go inside and there's of course basic groceries, 5 tons of snack food, chargers for your iPhone, a deli counter, a hot pizza. You know how it is, right?
Yeah.
So what would people do in that particular situation? Well, I mean, I often wonder if the franchisees, the owners of these individual locations, like, I know they have to do all these things with their franchises, but do any of them ever, at any of these places, Maple Fields, Cumberland Farms, whoever it is, do any of the franchisees ever say to corporate, no, I'm not going to stop my customers from being able to speak to the staff. We don't need another iPad here. That's just because you got a good deal on it doesn't mean it was a good idea for customer service. Mm-hmm. Does anyone say that?
Good deals on bad ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a corporate idiom. You know what I've been thinking of?
What have you been
I don't know if this is my tangent. I don't know if it's related, but maybe we'll make it related because human beings our brains are wildly plastic. We can do this. We can pull this off.
Yes.
So there's this thing called the Rightwing, and it has become dominant via Twitter and the previous presidential election. And within this discourse on the right wing, or the not left wing, or the no longer left wing,
okay,
there is a dividing, continually strained relationship between the so-called classical liberals and the harder than conservative right wing, like the dissident right wing or the E-right. And this contention particularly came to a head and has been coming to a head over conflicts that are very far away from America, at least as the crow flies. Maybe not as far as fiber optic cables are concerned, but there's this war in Israel between Israel and everything around it, specifically the Gaza Strip, and there's this war in Ukraine between basically NATO and Russia, but what are we supposed to? Even framing it is a point of contention. Even though there's a war around the framing of it, but there's this one very astute, well-spoken commentator from the UK, Douglas Murray, and he goes on this this bald bro jock comedian show, Joe Rogan, and Murray lays into Joe about not having enough people speaking to his side of the conflict on Israel, or Joe's hosting too many conversations that question the legitimacy of Israel's actions. And there was a big dust-up, a big reaction to this back and forth between Douglas Murray and Joe Rogan. And there's two layers of analysis, and I'm really interested in the socio analysis rather than the political analysis. Like, the political analysis it's framed around truth, but really it's around what are we going to do? And whoever controls the frame controls the policy. And there's a really strong contingent that's pro-Israel on the right wing, and it seems like those people have a very strong reaction to any questioning or criticism or skepticism about Israel's actions, or even what makes it a legitimate state. And so what Douglas Murray was trying to do was say, there's this reality on the ground. I've been there, and assumably Israel's actions are justified, and Douglas has gone on record saying that without Israel, the West will fall. If we don't back up Israel, then the West itself is at risk, which is a really strong position, which can be debated. I would like to debate that, I think that should be open to debate. But the way that he came out was really interesting. The way that he spoke his point of view. I don't know if you watched this interview.
I haven't, and I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint here. Okay. Because I am aware of what you're talking about. No, I have not listened or watched it. No, I'm not going to. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let me wrap up my point. Point. So maybe this is just a failed line of inquiry, but Murray evoked his power as an orator using his British accent and his disdain for the uninformed masses. And he went into Joe Rogan to rail Rogan about expertise and about legitimacy. And the way he went about doing that was decidedly uncool. And Rogan has recently mocked him in the accent, saying that you can't come on here. You cannot. The way that discourse is happening now is not to this appeal to authoritativeness. It's decidedly uncool to evoke the experts now. Now, what we do with that is a question. The experts have certainly lost a lot of credibility due to their signing up on board all these like blatantly false things and blatantly ridiculous things. But I guess it doesn't seem like you're this is clicking for you, but the way that discourse happens right now in the podcast land is through not necessarily loyalty, but it's through accumulated trust. And that trust is based on relatableness right now. It's not based on credentials, and it's not based on footnotes. One, because the organs of credentialism have imploded since COVID, and secondly, because oh man, I lost my thought. But credentialism doesn't really work. It's more about trust and relatableness, and the experts aren't as relatable now to us because we have so many different avenues of acquiring our collective cognition. People like you and the people that I host are people who are thinking, these public intellectuals who are masticating data and trying to make sense out of the world, are coming at us through all these different venues that are outside of the established organs. And so the way in which we speak about things is no longer theater kid, is no longer high theater kid. Douglas Murray is a high theater kid. He is a debater, right?
Yeah.
He speaks in a way where people listen. And you can see this. If you have a British accent, it's a lot easier.
He has an authoritative, sort of mesmerizing affect and presence.
Yeah, and there's something about the British accent that affords you
the posh
a certain
British accent
the
that
posh
he has.
British, yes, it affords you a certain level of automatic authority that I think it even now is under question with Joe, like making fun of that. It's interesting. I don't know what you think about that. Yeah,
well, I've been watching it. I've been watching it from the sidelines, obviously, and I don't take a position on it because I think I understand the position of both sides in this, and I think I can see reason and legitimate interest on both sides of this. Yes, I am one of the people who has questioned, obviously, the idea that one needs a set of credentials to be legitimately able to speak. I question that every week doing my show. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist, and yet what do? I talk about personality disorders and mental illness all the time. On the other side, I also understand the frustration of people who have built up actually objective real-world expertise. That does exist, right?
I hope so.
You know, it does exist. And I understand why it is irksome to them to hear or perceive that they are hearing people say your actual objective knowledge doesn't matter. Who I like matters more, or whose voice I like matters more. I understand the irritation with that. I've been in both situations at various points of my life, and I think most of us have too. Mm-hmm. But I think it's accurate that I think your summary is accurate that we are at a point where legitimacy is being actively contested. You know, we are fighting the fight right now that you described, which is does my voice carry more weight because I have PhD after my name in this subject matter, or does my voice carry more weight because I'm an intelligent commentator who does not have a financial or academic investment in this and is coming at it from the outside? Yeah. Both of them can have very reasonable points of view. What has irked me about watching this is the degree to which it is obviously, to a great degree, not entirely, I'm not dismissing anyone here, but yes, a great degree of this is a personality and tribal conflict. Not all of it, but some of it. I'm not interested in that. I understand it. I'll probably be a part of such tussles again, even though I'm going to try not to be. But
we could talk about some personality conflicts, but I don't want that getting involved.
I love to talk about personality conflicts.
Yeah,
I guess that's what I think.
I would go even one step further. Legitimacy is being contested all the way to the very top, and therefore to the very bottom, the very foundation of our nation, the United States. Who gets to make a legitimate choice on who gets to stay here and who gets to leave? Is it the court system? Mm-hmm. Is it the bureaucrats? Or is it the executive that was actually democratically elected?
Yep.
And then, to what degree does the legislator and the judiciary and the executive nullify each other's legitimacy in order to get anything done, or in order for their will to be done? It's all about delegitimizing your opponent in a certain way.
Well, I don't know if we'll get to this point, but I think we are closer to the point than we have ever been in at least my memory in my lifetime of somebody calling the question about the actual legitimacy of the courts. We're very, very close to a scenario where somebody, in this case, it's Donald Trump, but it could have been somebody else, and it might be somebody else at
Well, I
some
mean,
point.
Biden did that with the student loan stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
it might just brazenly say, "Make me,
yeah.
make me," and they can't make me, right? Yes, there are problems with that. Yes, that could pull the whole house of cards down. I see that could happen, but I think there are also problems that are just as dire at not asking the question.
Yeah.
Uh, I, I, it seems to me, it goes back to, I don't remember the specific verbatim way he said it, but Thomas Sowell talking about the fact that there's no such thing as a solution. There are only trade-offs. And that is true. I mean, I take that now as an objective description of a property of the universe. That's just a philosophically correct statement. But we don't act that way. And those who are afraid, whose fears are bound up with, well, if the courts lose legitimacy, then my interests are really threatened, and I think the interests of my neighbors are threatened. They believe that. Then people on the other side of the argument who say the courts are out of control, if my ability to say fuck off to the court and actually preserve my legitimate jurisdiction. This is my jurisdiction, right? That the court may say that it's theirs, but it isn't actually theirs. They feel threatened too by a court that won't recognize that there are boundaries around the court's jurisdiction. Both of those outcomes will have negatives and positives.
Yeah.
Both of them. So if we really were going to approach this in a rational way, which we're not going to, but if we were, we would actually sit down and write out a pro and con list for each set of possibilities, and we'd honestly talk with each other and say, which of these can we live with? That's not going to happen, though.
Why not? Why wouldn't it happen?
Because it never has before. That's not how humans do things.
I think we're closer to doing that now. I mean, via the modality of the patient conversation, the podcast domain, there's more room and people are more willing, at least by watch count. I'm sure
Right.
that you get to run a business, basically your own radio station now,
Under a shadow ban from YouTube.
Well, sorry about that. Hopefully it's not a super ban and they ban this episode from airing. But as long as it's sexy enough for people to pay attention to it, I don't see why not. I don't see why we can't have these really interesting discussions, pros and cons about denying the legitimacy of the court or hamstringing the Trump administration for the third iteration of it.
And perhaps I'm sure to some degree that is happening right now. It's going to look a lot different looking back in 10 years. A lot of things that are unclear to me now, I think I'll only be able to get clarity when I look back on them and other people have had their go at explaining them.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe you're right. Maybe more of that is happening than I see right now.
Yeah. So, what are some things that you're most concerned with or that inspires your attention? Not necessarily your invective, but like what the things that you're wrestling with, things that you're most concerned about on a political, social, personal, wherever sphere. I know you've had a lot of your brand, or your work rather, has gotten a lot of traction and has developed a lot through the modality of personality disorders. And I'm wondering, how far do those things reach? How far have they? How far has that brought you, and where has that brought you now, currently, thinking through these terms?
Well, I suspect I'm always going to be interested in abnormal psychology, particularly cluster B personality disorders, narcissism, unstable emotions, creating yourself into a victim when you're actually mistreating other people. I suspect I'll always be interested in that. It's a lens, if you will, but it's not. The subject matter isn't really just cluster B personality disorders. It's philosophy. It's how we know things. It's morality. It's what it is at bottom, my concern is about the truth and our orientation to the truth.
Okay. All right.
I'm not saying I know all the truth. I do
Yeah.
think I know some true things that I didn't know before.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the fact that we don't value truth. And this is personality disorders can show us this in the extreme, because the narcissist and the borderline, truth is not functional for them when they're operating from a place of, I need my unmet, broken personality needs met. I need these emotions serviced, and I'm going to do anything I can to get them. That's an extreme way to illustrate it, but the problem isn't restricted to just people who are diagnosable. It's infected so many of us. You know, we can't say the true thing if saying the true thing either makes somebody angry and have bad feelings, or if it punctures somebody's carefully constructed egotistical view of themselves and the world. We can't say the true thing. And we can't say the true thing if saying the true thing is coded as low status in my community.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's those values that I want to challenge directly.
Okay. At this point in my journey, I get a little wary when people bring up this word called truth.
Okay.
Because I see people who are really powerful orators, especially, use truth to justify not bad behavior, but to smuggle in their will. And I think that the truth and will cannot be disentangled. I think that people will always accentuate a truth that goes along with their will and de-accentuate a truth that goes against their will. And that's because we don't live in reality, we live in community, right? Maybe that's one way to say it. So there's some sort of
inevitable. What you're describing is inevitable. It can't be
it's
any
inevitable.
other way.
Yeah. So I make fun of the term epistemic humility because that's the most pretentious way of saying humility.
Yeah.
But even epistemic humility is always only in service of one's pride or one's will. It's always just there because I will use the right way of persuasion in order to get my will. And if truth it's got a glimmer to us, you know. Truth is almost has almost the power of the word God used to have in a way.
Okay.
So I'm just a little wary of that. So I'm always like, that's a fertile ground for exploration, and that's why I really like when you say our relationship to the truth. Like, okay, that's something that I feel a little bit more comfortable navigating.
Well, you're right. I mean, I'm involved with a dispute right now where I'm doing the very thing you just talked about. I am trying to accentuate a portion of the truth that I think is more important than the portion of the truth that my opponent in this issue is highlighting. So in a sense,
right now in this conversation, or like
not you and me, but in my life.
Yeah. No,
and I am trying to persuade on. I mean, I'll be writing something about this. It's not done yet, so I'm not trying to be vague, to be irritating. I'm just trying to be general about this. Yeah, I mean, my will in this scenario that I'm thinking about is I wish to persuade people who read or who listen to me that my framing is more accurate, is more appropriate to the ethics of the situation, and takes into account aspects of this truth that are far more operationally important with real people's interests wrapped up in them than the tiny sliver of truth as I see it from my opponent. So yeah, I'm trying to do that too. What else can I do?
Yeah.
What else can you do?
What do you mean ethics? Like the negative or positive effects on the most people, or like how do you?
Right. So all right, I'll give a little detail. I'm sure you don't. This does involve a personality conflict. Is that okay?
Yeah. Here we go.
Okay.
Watch this get clipped now.
It's definitely going to get clipped. And the person I'm about to talk about it will probably do a stream about it. Probably do one about you and about me. I just want to let you know that. Yeah. So I never thought I'd be talking about this because I've assiduously ignored her most of the time for the 3 or so years that I have been aware of her. But I'm talking about somebody named Karlin Borisenko, who's an online
Another
commentator.
Yankee. Yeah.
Yes, who's an online commentator who I believe is one of the most severely personality disorder people that I have personally noticed in my life. So I've already said this in public. That's not a surprise. I'm not breaking any news here. And I see her. It's not just that I see her. I'm afraid I'm going to say that I'm telling the truth here. She does actively digitally stalk people online, do reputation smearing campaigns, make false accusations against people. I've observed her do it. Thousands of people have observed her do it. The only reason I'm talking about this is I'm going to use it as an illustration of how to tell a good lie, because Karlin Borisenko is telling a good lie right now. And what I mean by a good lie is an effective lie. At least effective in some areas. This is all very silly, and it's very silly in its particulars. But the philosophical meat I'm trying to pull out of it, I don't think is silly.
Okay.
This is a woman who, in my view, she's just intensely narcissistic and is willing to be untruthful, and abusive, actually, to her own supporters, directly abusive and untruthful, to harangue people into paying her money, giving her attention, doing all of these things. And it was my perception that she recently used the death of her dog in a narcissistic way in order to generate sympathy and money that I felt was not a genuine expression of grief, but was actually a pretty insulting and offensive parody of grief, in order to activate emotions in people, for financial gain. So the long and short of it is I made a very, very short reply comment on Twitter to somebody who was poking fun at her. And the joke that this person put up was an AI picture of a Karlin Borisenko action figure, one of those parodies of this is the kind of person you are. Comes with this accessory, this accessory, this accessory. My only contribution to that, and I realize this can be taken the wrong way, people don't have context, but I said about the action figure, I just wrote needs a dead dog. And the joke was needs another narcissistic accessory, in order to fully capture the character right in the package. Borisenko, of course, immediately melted down, did a stream featuring me, about how I was a terrible person who was making fun of her dead dog, making fun of her grief, doing all of these things. Got a lot of sympathy for it. But that's how she's telling a good lie. So the best lie is a lie that incorporates some undisputable truth in it and takes that truth and polishes it up like a gem so that everyone's eyes are drawn to it. And they don't see everything else that's being hidden behind that, all of the machinations behind that. So the truth kernel is I did say what I said. I did write the words needs dead dog too, right? Mm-hmm. She's right that I wrote that. You can all see it online. I'm not going to deny it. She's wrong in what it means, though. She's using it to convince people that not only did I actively, and I didn't actively harass her. I replied to someone else's Twitter thread. I didn't tag her or anything like that. I've had her blocked for years. So no, I wasn't going after her and shoving it in her face. She needs that attention, though. She needs the perception that she's a victim. That's how narcissists like her operate. And without any other context, if you don't know anything about her behavior over the past 4 or 5 years, I do know about her behavior. I've seen it. I've been on the phone with people that she's targeted who've been genuinely frightened and genuinely really emotionally strained and upset by her false accusations. I've seen her behavior. If you don't have that context and all you see is she plucks that phrase out, it's easy to make me look like a really mean son of a bitch, right? She's just a poor, crying, grieving woman with a poor dead dog, and I went right for her softest spot because I'm a sociopath. It's very easy to do that because I did write those words. But no, I wasn't making fun of her grief. What I did was worse. I don't believe she's grieving. I don't believe she actually genuinely is experiencing grief. Yes, I am saying I don't believe her. Yeah, so I'm cutting even deeper than she's accusing me of. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How does one speaking of narcissists and your time spent with them and studying them and thinking through the effects that you've had personally and the social effects of them, how does one actually deal with them? There's the block, right? There's the expulsion. There's the ignorance, and you already knew this is a tar baby. As soon as you brought her up, now this is fair game. This is clippable. We just fed the hungry caterpillar.
I know.
Right?
I realize that. Yep.
Yeah. So is there options not to, or you do that, you take your licks? There's only trade-offs.
It depends on what your relationship is to the quote unquote narcissist in the situation. Like in this one, I don't really care. I just don't care. I've already formed my judgment of Karlin Borisenko. I'm not. She's done 2 streams about me. I mean, she did a stream about me 3 years ago when I had, like, I don't think I'd actually heard of her when she did the stream. She did a whole stream 3 years ago about how I was targeting her, and I was talking about her in my 2-part episode where I related my childhood story about my mother. She said the whole thing was about her. It was very strange. I'd never interacted with her. It certainly wasn't about her. She wasn't on my mind.
Yeah.
So I don't care. She doesn't have the power to make me feel bad. I don't have any emotional investment. I don't get a fear reaction when she calls me names. I don't feel insecure. I really don't care what she says. The only reason I'm talking about this is because it's a good example to teach a lesson about how narcissists use a kernel of the truth to create an effective lie. So in this case, there's nothing for me to care about. I don't really care if she clips me. But for people who do care, like the people my clients, the people who come to me for coaching and consulting sessions, often have a situation where the narcissist is in their house or is their boss or is the deacon at their church. And they have to interact with these people. How to deal with that is much more complicated in the real world because, and I can only make a general statement. I can't give a specific qualifier for every sub-permutation of this. That's not possible. My general statement is this. You have very few options when dealing with a true narcissist, a true sociopath, a true personality disorder person, someone who's, it's not on the edge, but, really is all the way there.
Yeah.
Your options are, in terms of getting through the moment with them, the acute confrontation, you can use the gray rock method, which is to think of yourself like a boring gray rock. You don't react. Your answers, if you must answer a question, you give simple one-word answers like yes or no. You don't offer opinion. You don't give anything for them to hook onto. So you don't do what I just did. What I just did was anti-gray rocking, right? I put red meat out for Karlin Borisenko. That's anti-gray rocking. That's exactly what I would advise people not to do if they have a narcissist in their real life who has the ability to affect them.
Does red meat ever work?
It depends on what your purpose is. Work for what?
Yeah, I guess.
For what purpose?
It would depend upon the domain. If you have leverage or power, or you can cause the situation to change in your favor or against the favor of the narcissist, then red meat might be a tactic that has a very specific goal. But
when you that it matters. That's why I asked, what do you mean by works? Works for what? So in this case, there's nothing that works to change a narcissist, either in the public domain or the private domain. There's nothing if you're listening to me right now, there's nothing you can do. You have no power to change that person. None. So we don't have to go any further with that. Does this work? For my purposes, it works because my purpose is to illustrate for other people how this dynamic works. That's my purpose. So it works for that. I don't care what Karlin thinks about it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think
about I don't have the power to make Karlin a different person.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about the analysis of Trump being a narcissist? Probably a tired line of inquiry, but
no, I mean, I think he does have heavy narcissistic traits. I'll admit, as you know, Benjamin, I started out as a woke lefty, and from 2016 to almost 2020, I was still kind of pretty much on the left. I mean, I was one of those hysterical lunatics who literally cried the night that Trump was elected in 2016. That was me. It was absolute absurdity. I was completely disconnected from reality. But I spent a lot of time writing, he's a narcissist. He's got narcissistic personality disorder. I'm now uncertain. I, what I'm uncertain about is whether he has full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not uncertain that he is highly narcissistic. I'm very confident in that. But I think that I'm seeing a man who has more moral depth to him than I credited before. So 5 years ago, I would have said, I don't think he has any human feeling for other people. I don't think I was right about that. I could be wrong now. I could be falling for spin. I could be doing projection. I could be fantasizing because I now call myself a conservative. All of those things are possible.
Yeah.
I think he's highly narcissistic. I think he's unfortunately susceptible to manipulation through flattery and sycophancy. I think these are weaknesses in his character, but I think he has a lot of strengths as well. So that's the best answer I can give you.
I guess the issue with having a narcissistic commander-in-chief is that he can be manipulated easily. And I think that was shown out in his debate with Kamala Harris, where she dangled something in front of him and that made him look bad because he jumped for it, like the crowd.
Yeah, see, I disagree. I disagree. In fact, I remember, I know exactly what you're talking about, but I spoke about this very thing on my show after that happened. I disagree that she made him look bad. I think that's our training. I think we have been trained. I think Kamala Harris, and I'm very confident about this. I could be wrong, but when I say I think, I don't mean 51%. I mean 95%. I think Kamala Harris expertly did bait him, yes. But her actions were far more wicked and evil than his honest frustration at being baited. Made him look bad. That gives too much credit. Why do we go right to that instead of saying, that manipulative bitch, she did that on purpose. She wasn't being honest. She was doing it for points. Why don't we comment on that? Why do we immediately say, you look so stupid for falling for it? I'm not saying you sound like that, but I hear this all the time. It's like, you took the low road. And I'm like, why don't you give a shit about the low road that she built?
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
There is a legitimate question about, whether you want somebody in a position who can be easily baited. That is a legitimate question.
Yeah. I find it interesting. You said that manipulative bitch. Mm-hmm. Our society, well, I mean, that brings up the gender war. And the gender war is fraught. There's too many. It's like the race war. It's like there's too many vested interests to keep people riled up on the feminist side or on the meninist side. The people are just like feeding on people's despair and trauma and bad luck or bad relationships in order to forward their own ends. But being able to call a manipulative bitch is it's got its own place. I'm wondering if that's kind of part of your work to normalize that, perhaps.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have a conscious interest that I'm servicing much of the time. I want to normalize criticizing women in the same terms that men are criticized. Yes.
Really?
I think that, yes. I think that women have been given a cultural free pass, not only to get away with bad behavior, but to actually be incredibly abusive and to rig economic, political, and cultural systems in their narcissistic favor at the expense of men and boys, and I'm tired of it.
Yeah, but that said, and I'm not disputing that, if we level the playing field, we're trying to level something that's uneven anyways. If you look at, I'm going to evoke evolutionary psychology. It's like our brains were built for the bodies that we find ourselves in. And so the strategies that our brains use to avoid suffering and to gain resources are going to be different because we live in different bodies. Specifically, men and women and children are programmed and have to adopt certain strategies. So manipulation, female typical, which is an interesting thing because the female typical response to female typical is to say, "Are you saying all women?" Which is a very female typical
yeah,
way
I know.
of getting around it. Being a manipulative bitch is something that you have to adopt if you are weaker, if you're physically weaker.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you can't necessarily say that we want to criticize men and women on the same terms because the terms are never going to be even. Men are going to have strengths in certain ways, and women are going to be stronger in other ways. So I guess this is kind of a pendulum question. Like, how do you know you're trying to get things back to equality, maybe, or to homeostasis of some sort, harmony, maybe? How do you know you want to nudge the needle? You know, I want to nudge the right into prominence, but I don't. And I'm aware that there is a too far for the right, but I'm a little bit more willing to push a little bit further than other people who are a little bit to the center of me, like already saying, no, the Nazis are coming, the Nazis are coming, the Nazis are coming. So it's an interesting dance to try to decrease the power and influence of women without overlooking their concerns and how they establish a system where their interests are served more than men's. I'm sure you're aware of all that.
Yeah, I know. But everything you just said is true. But here's what I'd add to it that I think clarifies the situation we're in. Men and women are different. You are correct that men and women will always use different strategies to exercise and accrue power. You are correct. But we are so out of balance right now that it is simply not accurate to characterize 2025 as, well, this is how women have to be. No, what I'm saying is it's never going to be equal, but it wasn't like this in 1955. It wasn't like this in 1900. It wasn't like this in 1850. There are other problems, of course, and the pendulum has swung in the other direction over history as well. But no, what we're doing right now is not just normal homeostasis. It's no, right? The very fact that, you know, and this is nothing to. I'm not accusing you of.
Oh no,
doing
I don't
You're
take things personally. That's one of my
reflecting
gifts.
the conversation. But the very fact that I have to justify this, and I do in 2025 America, I have to justify criticizing women. QED my thesis. QED.
Okay.
It's right there. No one has to justify criticizing men. I have to justify criticizing women. No, I'm going to keep talking this way until that changes.
Okay. Well, what is balance then? What is balance? Do we have a positive vision?
It's not what we have now.
Okay, well, that's not a positive vision.
I don't know what the perfect homeostasis will look like, and I'm not obligated to know that. I can't know that, but I'm not actually, I'm not doing a bad, and I haven't neglected my work by saying I don't know.
Okay. Well, when we cast this onto the left-right dynamics, I think I could, given time and enough patience from the audience or my interlocutor, kind of establish what I would think of as a good balance between the conservative and the liberal. And even the progressive and the dissident, or reactionary, I guess. I got to stop using dissident. And I think reactionary is still a response and still a negative, a not left framing. And maybe there is no such thing as right. Maybe there's only not left. But I can kind of conceive of a balance between the different interests of the different parties. And it would be even kind of ironic because you can, I won't go into the Israel question, but Israel in a certain frame of looking at it is kind of what the white ethno-nationalists want. They want their own, they want France to be France, they want Britain to be Britain, and they want parts of America to be coded in a certain way. And I have no problem with that, but I still have, you have to ask, well, how do these groups interact with these groups? Because we can't, I guess you could try to go back to the Stone Age, but we do live within a capitalistic trade network. So the liberals are going to have to serve the conservatives and the conservatives are going to have to serve liberals. And maybe that's the point. So
it's
the service of men
to learn that.
Wait, sorry, what?
It's the liberals' job to learn that. Again, this is not a both sides thing.
Okay.
Conservatives have been serving liberals, licking the bottom of their shoes, basically, for decades. And let's you know what? We can get real world specific with this.
Yeah.
Let's talk about businesses that serve customers.
Yeah.
You don't see conservative businesses putting up signs that say no. Once in a while, you may. I realize there's somebody out there, there's somebody in the audience right now, right this minute, who is copying and pasting a picture he took that shows exactly what I'm saying doesn't happen. I get it, Biff. I get it. But the reality, I just decided his name is Biff, whoever this anonymous person is. But it is vastly more likely that you are going to see businesses that say no Trump support. Well, you don't see them much anymore, but you certainly saw them during the height of COVID, even when Trump wasn't in office. It is the liberals who don't want to be sullied by contact with conservatives rather than the other way around. It's the liberals who want to be able to not trade and do custom with conservatives they don't like, although they claim to be about equality. It's not a bi-directional problem.
Yeah. Okay.
You're right that we all have to figure out how to do these things. So what would homeostasis look like in the gender wars question? I'll give a couple of examples. I can't describe the entire world to you that I think would be perfect. I don't know. I need to get there and see it. But things like, for example, that male commentators don't need to walk on eggshells and apologize and say, please, nice lady, ma'am, miss, I'm not a misogynist when I notice that women are sometimes a little bit more emotional than men. All this groveling, all this, the fact that every single thing that a scorned woman does not like, that isn't her favorite in 2025, when a man does it, has been inflated. If it were 1975, it might have been called male chauvinism or sexism. It is now today called misogyny. It is called hatred of women. That word evokes violence. It evokes connotations of violence, psychosexual violence. Those are valences that word carries. And they're doing this deliberately. This is bullshit, and it is hamstrung men from being able to speak out. Men have buckled under to this, and they need to stop buckling under. Homeostasis would have a scenario where the family courts did not so consistently favor giving the mother automatic custody, even when the mother is the more abusive of the two parents. Homeostasis would look like universities going back to being afraid of getting penalized for discrimination when they do things like, this chair is only open to a woman. This, Homeostasis would look like some of what the Trump administration is trying to do, bringing back due process on college campuses for men who are accused of sexual crimes. Not let men off, but bring back due process. It's things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Counterpoint. So my wife, Leslie, posted a video that's gotten a lot of traction, speaking with an anti-feminist or post-feminist or ex-feminist woman. And that woman goes really hard into the issues that you go into. And Leslie, I think over the family court debate, gave pushback with her own lived experience, describing how that is problematic. I like to trigger the centrists by using progressive coded language and rightists. But, Leslie has a particular path through life, and she has had a couple of relationships involving kids fall apart, and the male shirked his responsibilities. And because of Washington, the way that Washington works, it's like it's up 50-50. And it brings up the question, are courts actually capable of investigating? Do we even want courts investigating fault when it comes to a relationship? And do we want the courts investigating personality disorders, going through people's texts? I guess people willfully give that to the court. That was, I spoke with the guy who's against no-fault divorce, and that's what he kind of basically brings up. It's like, we're giving the state all of this power to make decisions which we don't know if it's capable of doing. And once you bring this personal matter into the court, you're offloading what used to be society's job. Like charity used to be society's job.
Yes.
Now it's the government's job. These relationship issues used to be the church's job, and now it is society's job. And there's got to be more nuance. Anyways, the point of the matter is, one of the points of the matter is that Leslie, because she was vulnerable in that way, has been the target of a massive amount of rather vile pushback from males about males coming from a point of view that you describe of being ground down by the system, ground down by the education system, ground down by media to think that they're worthless and they're second-class citizens. And there's a way to bring these concerns up without destroying the woman that you're talking to, without doing this, being a manipulative bitch. Or I guess an offended.
What
bitch.
of what I have said constitutes destroying a woman?
No, I'm not bringing that up against your point. I'm just saying that there's a way of handling ourselves that has to be addressed as well, because being a manipulative bitch and also being there's got to be a formulation. Somebody who's just a man specifically who's filled with resentment and needs to take that out communicatively online through words is a typical female coded way of dealing with the problem. And it doesn't even deal with the problem. It's just an expression of the problem. So that is beneath, that should be seen as beneath a man to do. Okay. Just like it should be seen as beneath a woman to be a manipulative bitch. Yeah, be manipulative and be a bitch, but you have to understand that there's a way to present ourselves, and that's why I still adhere to some sort of semblance of Victorian morality or chivalric ideals where a woman should be fair and kind, which means to be very subtle with her manipulations. And a male to recognize his
manipulation-free interaction. I mean, humans manipulate.
Yeah,
there's no such thing as a manipulation-free interaction.
Yeah, and a man coerces. A man uses force, implied or direct, to get his way too.
I mean, if you break it down in the crudest terms, women manipulate, men coerce. But there's a lot of daylight between the extremes there for both sexes. Yeah. Now, Benjamin, I agree with you. That's the society I'd like us to get to. But I don't know how we get there. I don't know the specific step-by-step process that we get there. And I'm afraid I think that, maybe I know your wife, Leslie. You know what I think.
Oh, yeah. She likes you a lot. Like, we joke that she only married me to get to you.
Well, I'm sorry, Leslie. It's not that much of a prize. I'm not talking about Benjamin. I'm talking about me.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
But the thing is that many men do feel that way, though, and they have a reason to feel that way. I'm not saying that it's good behavior for them to attack somebody like your wife, who is eminently reasonable. I'm not defending that, but I'm saying this simply is the reality. Lots of men have very legitimate anger at the way men have been treated in society, from the family courts to the way boys are punished in school and drugged for alleged ADHD, all the way up to college, where if you get accused of being inappropriate, you are suddenly known socially as a rapist. These are real things that have happened to men. It's real. It's not exaggeration. They are angry. I'm one of them. I'm not even as angry as some of the men because I'm gay. I don't have an ex-wife. I'm never going to have. I'm not a baby daddy, right? But I'm a human. I have a mother. I have a sister. I had grandmothers. I have women friends. I live in the world with women. There are women that I love. Yeah. But like myself, for example, yes, right now at this point in my life, I preferentially distrust women as women more than I distrust men. And the same thing goes for gay people, by the way. And I'm a gay guy. Okay, so this is not. If you want to think of me as a misogynist, don't think of me only as a misogynist. You're not that special.
I'm a homophobe.
I'm also a homophobe. Okay, so
that's why I call myself a conservative. I'm also a little bit racist too. So come at me, bro.
I hate myself. But yeah, women have to meet up. They have to pass more tests for me before I will let my guard down around them. Gay men have to pass much higher tests for me.
Why gay men? Is that a political thing? Because
because way too many of them are. Let me save my fire for another time. Way too many of them are. No, let me not say. They're functional women. women gone wrong. They're histrionic, they're excessively emotional and often irrational, and frankly very narcissistic. Gay men are far more likely to be woke, to call themselves feminists. I'm shocked at this because I'm 50 years old. I'm old enough to have seen the change in society from the days where certain acts I could engage in could actually put me in jail under the law, to where we are now. So I know we're in a much better place. These gays are acting like it's 1969 pre-Stonewall, and they're being oppressed everywhere, and it just isn't true. So, you know, I'm afraid the sad reality is, and this has always been true statistically, it's not a new thing, it's not new right-wing bigoted science. If you look at the literature, the rate of mental illness, unresolved trauma, addiction, drug addiction, drink, personality disorders among homosexuals is far higher than the heterosexual population.
Is that because
That's
of
just a
minority
fact.
stress?
No, it's not. It's in, that's what everybody says, and I'll never make a dent in that, but I don't believe in the minority stress model. I think it's mostly from child abuse and neglect. Yeah.
Tough question. Were sodomy laws a Chesterton's fence?
I know. I know. It's a good question. It's a really good question. Um, Jesus. This is where it gets tough. This is where it gets
This
really
is
challenging.
that or gay marriage is a little bit
Yeah, same thing. I think about these things all the
easier.
time inside I'm always thinking about this stuff. Um, I think you could make an argument that sodomy laws were a kind of Chesterton's fence. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to decide, oh yeah, we should go back to those. That was, if you use the Chesterton's fence model, okay, so before you tear the fence down, you need to know why it was built. There was clearly a problem, a perceived problem that this fence solved, or that people believed this fence would solve. They're probably right that there was a problem condition. And we moderns, as we consider looking at that fence, we should be aware of that, because we might fall victim to that problem condition if we pull that fence down. This is all very rational, and people should think about things this way. That doesn't mean that the fence they built was the best fence or the best defense, and it doesn't mean that the fence didn't bring its own problems that might outweigh the original problem condition. We don't know, but we have to ask and examine.
Yeah.
So let me be completely transparent here. It's not possible for me to think about this 100% rationally. There is an emotional, personal investment in this for me. So I'm disclosing that I know that. I can't get rid of it, but I am aware that it's here. As a gay man, I have a personal interest. I find it repugnant to contemplate that the government should have any power to actually monitor my private sexual behavior. I find that repugnant. And I don't think I'd be willing to accept it. Yet, on the other hand, we have no barriers now to the most depraved behavior, not just homosexual behavior. There are a lot of people out there who think that any homosexual act is itself depraved and as depraved as any other depraved act. I understand that they're real. I don't agree with them. But we have no guards on it right now at all. And the gays and the queers, the people who call themselves part of what we used to call the gay community, they may not even be homosexuals at all. It's full of perverts. It's full of predatory perverts who are after your children. Quite literally, they say it. They do wish to have the right to walk down the street completely naked, displaying their shaved anuses or engaging in fellatio in street fairs. These people are real. We've all seen them. We need to get rid of that. So can we do that with a different fence? Can we, for example, can we say, okay, the government has no right to look, the government has no right to actually look at the actual sexual practices that you are keeping private in your own bedroom. It doesn't have to do with gay people or straight people. It's just humans. The government can't be in your bedroom. Why can't we do that? And also, and it has to stay in the bedroom. And if it doesn't, you are going to be arrested for public obscenity. You are going to be photographed, and we are going to shame you. We're going to smear your reputation because you deserve to have a reputation in the village as a predatory pervert. That is a just outcome. Can we do that?
Well, we would have to define perverse. Perverse from what? That means there has to be a standard.
I mean, we can.
And I guess
we
you
can
say
go,
privacy.
We can do this all over the
Yeah,
place. We
yeah,
can
right,
play
yeah.
the Supreme Court and say. I mean, look. The reality is, I'm not going to. I really don't care to do that
Yeah.
because I don't think it's that difficult. I think most reasonable people agree that things like walking down the street completely naked and engaging in fellatio on the street in front of children is itself depraved obscenity. We don't have to solve every edge case before we stop that from happening.
Okay. I guess there's always going to be edge cases.
Of course there are.
We get
but
gummed
we're
up in
allowing
that.
edge cases to stop us from making any judgments at all. Well, we
Yeah.
haven't solved every edge case, so we can't go forward with anything.
Yeah, human beings like simplicity. I mean, I guess that would be something on the not left that is problematic. When you get
left.
it's really difficult for society at scale to accept ambivalence.
Yes.
I guess we can.
It's hard for us individually too.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like the gray area is a really difficult thing to navigate. And when we're talking about something that is harmful, then we can start to erect a solid lines. We can start to declare this is the line in the sand. And that line needs to be policed. And so we as a society are going to do that. It's just, it's difficult stuff. And with regard to homosexuality, well, I guess with regard to homosexuals, you brought up some negative attributes of the homosexual, tendency to be more female-like in certain respects, the tendency to be more narcissistic, to rely on emotional and, manipulation, because they're probably actually largely considered weaker. They're a weaker part of the male sex, so of course they're going to adopt those different strategies. But I think that, there's the act, and what we do about the act, or how we conceive of the act, or whether we not conceive of the act. And I think the society had this kind of gentleman's agreement called privacy. Like, keep it in the bedroom. We're gonna wall off that. I'm not gonna think about that, and you're not gonna make me think about that. We're just gonna let bygones be bygones. That was one way of handling that. But there's also like an aspect of the homosexual or people who end up being homosexual that they do have something to add. There's a positive, and you can see this historically. And I guess this has been taken too far with like the historical trans people, which doesn't really exist. Artists, writers, a certain proclivity, especially the male homosexual, can be very... have a lot of the female gifts and a lot of the male gifts like combined in a particular way, being very verbally, very sensitive, and if put through the proper channels, like can really articulate things very well. I'm thinking Andrew Doyle is just just a brilliant man. And his homosexuality and his brilliance are like one sexuality is part and parcel of their creative self. It's like very deep. And so you can, like, from my point of view, like trying to understand this kind of progressive, liberal, conservative kind of and reactionary skew, it's like, well, the homosexual who understands that their job is not to put themselves first and foremost in society, but to actually serve society, and understand that actually without breeders, they don't exist, and that they cannot breed. So they have to breed mimetically. And so they have to actually adulate heterosexuality and put that forth, treat that as something sacred.
Interesting.
And then in order to add their gifts to society. And in service of society. I think service is basically, which is kind of coded. Actually, I think liberals, progressives, dissident, or reactionaries, and conservatives, I think in a Christian society, I think we can all understand that to serve society is my best gift to society and actually affords me being a member of society. And so to look at my different predilections, my different faults, and to minimize those as much as possible and seeing my faults as things that hinder society or give a weight to society, and understand those as something that is aberrant, right? It's not necessarily perverse, but it's aberrant to what causes society to be fruitful and multiply. Yeah. And I think under that rubric, I think is something that rational, good-natured human beings can come together and kind of let our bygones be bygones, insofar as we're all making sacrifices. And you could say that with the heterosexual man, I sacrifice my predilection towards polygyny, not polyamory, yes. But polygyny, in order to understand that, I am best and society's best when I choose and devote myself to one woman and make that sacrifice.
Yes. I think a great deal of this trouble would be solved if we went back to the gentleman's agreement of privacy. Yeah. We need to get back the barrier between the public and private self. It's been destroyed.
How do we do that? I mean, everything in our media landscape is telling us.
I think it's happening right now.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if we come back to each other in 20 years, Benjamin. I wouldn't be surprised if we looked back on this conversation and said, well, look at that. We've got a much stronger sense of privacy and boundaries between personal and public than we did when we had that conversation. I hope that's the case. I'm not sure about it. But aside from that, we were talking about the contributions of homosexuals.
More boundaries, less borderlines.
There we go. No more open borderlines.
Cue Madonna.
I agree with you. And I would, because it's self-serving. But I think even if it weren't self-serving, I would also agree with you.
Well, I mean, maybe that's the best possible scenario. A self-serving scenario.
Well, what I mean is, I do think that gay men, particularly, lesbians have their own quality. I'm not talking about lesbians here. It's sort of a different. It requires its own conversation. But gay men, yeah, I mean, as we know historically, have tended to be arbiters of culture, critics of culture, artists, decorators. Involved in some way with creating or maintaining beauty in the world, whether that's personal beauty like hairstyling or architecture or interior design or movie sets or writing plays or writing, all of it's true. Gay men are often overrepresented among what we call the creative classes.
Yeah. They're the Jewish sexuality.
Yes. Right. And yes, I think there's something about the gay male critic who's verbally facile that you don't find in any other type of person. Take somebody like Quentin Crisp, the late Quentin Crisp, who wrote the book The Naked Civil Servant, a British, very fey, extraordinarily effeminate, old school British fop, right? He wore a purple ascot and lipstick, didn't dress as a woman, but had all the, this sort of thing. And he's a fascinating cultural critic. You can get a perspective on what men and women mean to each other and what we think of when it comes to men and women from reading Gay Men that you're not going to get from another kind of critic or writer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like those things, too. I try to do some of those things in my own way.
Yeah.
But so I think, I mean,
you can say that I can make. What? No, I'm interviewing you. You think that we're what?
Okay, I think that we gays are better as seasoning than as the main course.
Oh, okay. That was it's more sensual than I was expecting, Josh. I think under that rubric, and this is where it gets really, really dicey. And I say that with a little bit
say
of
that as a piece
glee.
Of seasoning that often wants to be the main course.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. To each his own. But one could do an analysis of autogynephiles and see that they do have a predilection towards certain Not necessarily insights, but a certain sort of person tends to be an autogynephile, and that's usually a very intelligent, high-powered male. And there's some sort of inversion on the sexuality, and there's some sort of approaching of the feminine that isn't gay. Well, it's kind of gay in a derogatory sense because it's literally kind of gay, but it's highly heterosexual, but highly. You can look. A lot of AGPs they have a personality type, and it's like autism conceived of as a spectrum. You have these so-called high-functioning autists that they have a gift to give to society. But if we handle their disorder in the wrong way, then everything falls apart. The whole thing gets off the rails. And so there's certain boxes, and we can let the gay out of the box a little bit, but right behind the gay is the autogynephile. In opening these boxes and exploring the difference between a so-called fetish and a so-called orientation, and in exploring or questioning what makes something perverse and how do I let my perversion not be the perverse thing, right? And this works within the like, what can I get away with? And I think that the conversation to make heterosexuals uncomfortable with their own, like, what do I need to give? I don't need to give up anything. It's like pornography. Come on, like that is something that consumed and put into a little tiny closet space is one thing, but now it's escaped that and it's everywhere, and we need to put it back because it's destroying a generation.
The key is behavior. It's not the essential ontological state of the person. I mean, we can talk about that. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But in the real world, it doesn't matter. In the real world, the only thing that matters is behavior. So whether or not the autogynephile, whether we can tease apart his psyche and debate whether it's a perversion, whether it's a depravity, whether it's an orientation, we can do all that, but none of that makes any difference in my neighborhood, for example. Yeah. Behavior makes a difference. You don't get to walk around on the street in obscene clothing or lack of clothing. You don't get to you don't get to make overtly sexual behavior normal in public, and we don't have to not criticize you because you're a man in a dress. Nobody, I mean, I'm single, and I happen to be, I'm single, and I've been single and celibate for at least 6 years. But that may not be the case at some point. Nobody is ever going to know the details of what I may or may not do in the bedroom.
Yeah.
No one is ever going to know that. Even if I couple up with a guy and I spend the rest of my life with him, you are never going to hear about any of our private activities. I'm never going to wear a shirt that talks about them. I'm not going to walk down the street with my cock hanging out. I'm not going to call him daddy in front of other people. You see what I mean? You are never, ever going to know any of these things because that's disgusting. The autogynephile can live by the same behavioral code, just to be a normal, non-depraved person in public.
Mm-hmm. Well, to ratchet that up, I do have a recurring intrusive thought that what stays in the bedroom what happens in the bedroom never actually stays in the bedroom. And that might be my Christian upbringing, but it's just looking at society. I think it's really important for us to be clean even in private. And so that goes back, it just makes me think about what you're talking about reestablishing privacy, is to actually kind of reestablishing a sense of shame with regard to our own dignity. And I don't know where that goes. And I really do not think that it's necessarily the state's job to police that. Actually, I explicitly no. But I do think without a society where people are holding themselves even in private to a certain standard, that what we do in private it leaks out energetically. And this, I know this is totally floofy. I know it's not an empirical thing.
No, it's not, Benjamin, because I think about it, what you're talking about right now, I have the same thought. I think about what you think about too.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound weird to me.
And so the only thing that can take the place of the state in that is to hold I think it's actually to return to a more human-sized understanding of what we need, which is, in the absence of church going, is to have somebody that you can be accountable to participate even vaguely in some sort of confessional, to examine your behavior and to question your behavior. This makes me feel good, so therefore it is good, is not... It's how we got here. It's like how we got here. Yeah, so just because so examining what makes me feel good and allowing myself to feel shame is a way to orient myself, and then to become a leader among men, and to become somebody privately and publicly is worth being respected.
I agree with you, and I suspect you're right that what starts in the private sphere, we can call it the bedroom, but I don't think it's just restricted to sexual private activities. But what happens in the sexual bedroom often doesn't stay there. Yeah. And there is a connection between what standards of virtue we hold ourselves to in private, and how they reflect and influence how we act virtuously or unvirtuously in public. I think you were right about that. Yeah. I don't know. I may know in 10 years. I may get an answer. But I'm wrestling with these questions personally with myself, too.
Yeah.
I do wonder. I'm not making any commitment, but for example, I'm an agnostic religiously. I simply don't know. Getting to agnosticism from hard new atheism was a big slog for me. My programming and the programming that I surrounded myself with and did to myself too. I had and have to some degree still too much ego bound up in seeing myself as a person who's too smart to believe in God. There are a lot of leftists out there who have that problem. I'm not a leftist anymore, but I'm still the same person I was. I still have some of the same problems that I used to. I wrote about this the other day. I can't actually know if there's a God or not. That's not within my power to know that, the way I can know that the sun comes up every morning. And I don't want to get any more finely detailed about epistemology because it just runs in a circle. I have to accept that I do know that the sun comes up every morning as a baseline. So I don't know that God exists. And I'm at war with myself over whether I want to know that God exists. There is a strong part of me that wants to be a Christian. There's a strong part of me that wants to know the Christian God, and I want it to be true and real. There's an equally strong part of me that either doubts that it's real and or tells me that this is another expression of my traumatized childhood, and I'm trying to fool myself into a new kind of self-hypnosis to feel better at night. Then there's also the part of me that worries, even though I'm not actually a believer, there is a core in me. It's just simply true. I can't reconcile this for anybody. I can't make it make sense. It's all conflicted. But there's a part of me that believes I'm living in a state of sin by being a homosexual. And then there's a part of me that says that's not true. So I have a lot of very conflicting ideas in my head about this right now. It's tough stuff it's really tough stuff to think through.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the only way to do that is to allow those different parts to converse with each other, and then do like some sort of experiment or empirical experiment with one's behavior and see what gets me closer to peace, which isn't necessarily feeling good about yourself.
No, not necessarily.
I was in my stepdaughter got baptized into the Orthodox Church on Saturday, and the service went on forever. They had so many people getting baptized. I think it's just the cool thing right now. God bless them all. But I was in this place of worship for a very long time, and I did as much praying as I could, and I'm like, I need a break. So I went down and I got a book on Orthodox psychotherapy, because they had a bunch of books. This tradition, this faith has a lot of writing in it. It's very logos centric faith, and the guy was talking about disorders of the heart and disorders of the mind. And in the passage on disorders of the mind, it was very interesting. Because he said that the disbelief, the active disbelief in God has a threefold effect. It has effect on your relationship to God, it has effect on relationship to yourself, and it has an effect on your relationship to other people. And he said that if you rely on your mind to make sense of the world, your mind is built to make sense of the world itself, not of God. And if the mind goes in search of God, it will not find God, but it will assume that it is God, because it is what is making sense of the world. It is what is bringing logos to the world, and then it puts itself into the status of God, and then it starts to judge everybody. It starts to separate oneself from oneself as something that can be thought through, and then starts to judge other people and starts to make all these separations between oneself and one other. And the only way to get beyond that, or to not go down that path, is to understand that there is a way of knowing that is not intellectual. It's on a deeper level, and it's in relation to know God isn't to cogitate God. To know God is to be in relationship to God. And the only way to really get to there is through self-denial, is to take a step back from the pleasures that one finds in the world, and even to take a step towards that which is irritating or uncomfortable in the world. And that's also how one reconciles or initiates the process of healing of the heart, is to not give the heart what it wants, is to actually take a more fatherly role in one's heart and a little distance and say, no, I'm not going to give you what you want. I'm not going to give you the ice cream of self-pity or pride. You're like, no, we're going to fast from these things. And only in that separation does one gain awareness of, I guess, the fascia of consciousness, that which ties all these different aspects of us together, and that which is the tying of us together. So you have to be yourself. You have to be honest with yourself, and you have to allow yourself to go through these. I think it's incredibly stunning and brave that you're at a stage in your life where you've developed a healthy honesty and a healthy distrust of yourself, and just say, I don't know if it's right. I feel a part of me feels wrong, and a part of me wants to excuse that wrong. And I don't know what to make of that, because I don't want to accept myself as faulty. But the cool thing about Christianity, it says, you know what, dude, welcome to the club. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people don't understand. I didn't understand until more recently. When whoever you are, a homosexual, a kid from an abused household, a drug addict, even if you're sober, somebody who's been through the ringer and has come out on the other side having no relationship to God, or a fractured and a troubled one. It's very hard for such people to believe that when a Christian says to them, I mean it when you hear the phrase, love the sinner, hate the sin, it's not just a trademarked phrase. I mean it. I don't hate you. I don't think you're disgusting. I don't think you're obscene. And I also don't think that I'm better than you. I also know that I'm a sinner, that I am as flawed as all other humans. Yeah. I didn't believe that any Christian actually meant that for most of my life. I now see that they do. But a lot of people, that's a really hard place to get to for people. They to the extent that people who reject it for the reasons that I did, I can tell you I genuinely I wouldn't have believed you 15 years ago. If you'd said that to me, I would not have believed you. I do believe you now. That takes time. It takes probably some other things too, but a lot of people don't get there.
I think that what you said there, I'm not better than you, is part of the way to solve a lot of the different things that we're talking about, but it's impossible. It's an impossible solution, because you can't interact on the political or any of these culture war issues by not taking your ground and saying my ground is better. But I think of those.
Yeah, I mean something a little different. I'm not saying that Yeah, it's possible for one person to be right and the other to be wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's it, it
Yeah.
there that is possible. What I mean is, it's like you like what it,
Hmm.
if I am to genuinely say to somebody, I do not think I'm better than you. What I'm saying to them is, I do not believe that I was conceived or put on this earth, that I exist in a state of morality that is higher. It's really
Yeah.
hard to figure out how to say
I
this.
yeah, I hear
I
what
may
you're
be
saying.
right on this and you may be wrong. I may be making good actions on this axis while you're making bad actions and mistakes, but that doesn't mean that I think there's something lower about your soul or character than mine.
Yeah.
It just means that I think you're mistaken on this issue and that I have been equally mistaken on other issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does. I think to go back to what I was trying to wrestle with about the Douglas Murray, Joe Rogan thing, which is a cultural thing, and I think it's about arrogance. It's like who, and the comedian who makes fun of the arrogant guy is kind of being arrogant in his way. Punching up
Hmm.
is a way of punching down. It's like bringing somebody into
Yeah,
lower stats,
yeah, it
and that's
is.
part of the game. That's part of the game, and just to understand that that's part of the game is essential. But going like thinking about those men who were really ravenous towards Leslie, really judgmental towards Leslie, I think part of that is because they just don't feel, a lot of people, men and women, because they are men and because they are women, feel downtrodden and feel like they've been made to feel lesser. And there's a real necessary act from those of us who can afford to reach out and say, no, you're not lesser. I don't see you as lesser. I actually see you as the potential of great nobility, great feminine nobility and great masculine nobility. And the world has put you in a situation to not accentuate that, but it's up to you to actualize that. And this is not the way to actualize it. It's actually you're wallowing in your shit.
Hmm.
Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, yeah, it's hard, and it's going to remain hard. These men, that's a good example. My guess is they really do, they mistrust women in a way that I do, or maybe even in different, maybe even more in some ways, especially those men who've had direct romantic relationships with women, which I have not. Um, they distrust. And as I struggle with, I have high distrust myself for a lot of things and a lot of people. And I'm unwilling to lower my emotional guard
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
My default, it's not great. I mean, I have plenty of character flaws, and one of them is, when I feel threatened, I become, you know, angry and derisive and arrogant and
A manipulative bitch.
a bitch. Yeah, I'm sure I'm capable of being manipulative. I do try consciously not to be
Yeah.
manipulative in that way. I know I fail. Um, there's so much I don't know, Benjamin. I don't. It's I've said before. We've talked so many times before. I know I've said to you before, and I've said on the show before. The version of me from 15 or 20 years ago could never have believed that I would be a conservative politically, that I would be sympathetic to Christianity or Catholicism as I am. I wouldn't have believed any of those things. That's true. But what's also true is I think of myself as a particular. I'm not unique. There are millions of people like me, but I think of myself as belonging to the set of damaged people, people damaged by early childhood experiences, as a far more stubborn, broken, incapable person than the average background person in the population. And so when when I see myself at 50 being willing to consider whether God is real, this is stuff I didn't think I was capable of doing. I'm glad that I have gotten as far as I have. I'm not a finished project at all. And I'm not trying to big myself up, but I'm really grateful that I've gotten as far as I have, because I literally did not think I was capable. As Josh Slocum, I'm not capable of this. But it turned out that I was capable. I don't know how. I don't know how it got here. And so I don't know what to tell other people. I don't know what the process is. And I think to myself, if I, as fucked up and intransigent as I often am, if even I can do this, I'm sure it's got to be easier for people who are less fractious than me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I think part of my role is just to get these yearly or whatever snapshots of you and your journey. And there was last time we spoke, you were in a particularly difficult spot, and I got some criticism for like trying to get into that with you, even though it was personal, and maybe it was callous of me in certain ways that I approached that, but it documented where you were as a creature in time. And that's part of the power of your testimony or of your process, is that you're not a broken house that remains in the same state. Like you're renovated. You're slowly getting renovated, and you can hear it in the way that you talk. You can hear it I can hear it in the way that you speak, in the way that you formulate things, in the way that you're more certain or less certain about different things. So I just think you're a testament to what you're saying, that you can't tell anybody anything, but you can show them through your life this process unfolding mysteriously.
Or a portion of it. There are other people
yeah.
who do it much better than I do.
Yeah.
There are, I mean, are we not all those people though? I mean, no, I guess we aren't all, because it's possible to get stuck.
Yeah.
I was stuck for a long time. A lot of people are stuck.
Yeah. I think
been stuck or
a
felt
disorder,
stuck.
somebody who says that when we use the word disorder, I think of it as somebody stuck, and probably very stuck, rather.
Yeah, this again is points to the need for discernment and judiciousness, because there are projects and actions and conversations that need the concept of disorder in order to take place and to be effective. But there is a place where disorder has to be reined back in and not allowed to be the controlling dynamic, because it'll prevent you from moving. So I feel like I'm barfing up shit that my therapist said to me literally 5 years ago that I had such a hard time grasping. And these are not original thoughts to me. I sure as shit didn't come up with this stuff on my own.
Yeah.
But I would ask him so many times, what are we to do? What am I to do in this situation? What are we to do when we look at the next 25 years of our life? What direction do we point ourselves in, even if we don't know all the stops along the way? Mm-hmm. And he's always talking about we need to aim for discernment. That's just another word for judgment, or a word for wisdom, or a word for there's a million synonyms for it. We don't like that because it requires us to take on ambiguity. No, it's more than that. It requires us to be responsible for taking action in situations where we can't know the outcome necessarily of what we're going to do, and it could be a bad outcome. So we wish to avoid. I think this is behind that. The fact that the phrase "don't judge" immediately lights up a part of the American brain, because we've heard it for so many decades. The fact that has its special light in our brain is something really wrong with us, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason we're a society that does not want to judge. We are very judgmental, but that's not the same thing as discerning and judging. But we get it mixed up. We don't want to judge because we don't want to take responsibility if we make a bad judgment. So we don't want to judge at all. We don't want other people to judge us. So we say, hey, don't judge. I'm not judging you. Don't judge. Well, we have to judge all the time. You judge when you're at a stop sign. You judge whether or not there's another car coming and you can go. Yeah. And you can scale that up to complicated things. Everything is an act of judgment, but we don't want to make moral judgment because we ourselves don't want to be judged, and we don't want to pay the price for our mistakes.
Yeah. When in reality, for adults, judgment is the main course and tolerance is the side dish. Or the dessert.
Yes. Yeah, we can't avoid it, but we spend a lot of time talking. We do a lot of verbal theater and talk around these things so that we can convince ourselves that we can avoid judgment, or we can avoid these sticky ethical quandaries where we might look foolish, or whether we might be proven to have been foolish.
Yeah. Or foolish or bigoted or any number of negative social consequences for asking, probing, questioning these kind of divine orders to be tolerant of everything.
Yeah, you can't, and like, okay, I'll speak as if I were a Christian.
Hey, man.
To my understanding, which is extremely limited, but to my best understanding of what God in the Christian sense wants from people, I don't believe that it is, I don't think that God asks for sinlessness in humans. I don't mean to suggest that it's okay to just go forth and sin. That's not what I'm saying. But I don't think that. I'm kind of talking to myself at the same. I'm trying to convince myself at the same time as I'm trying to make a point here. It's okay to be broken. It's okay to be weak. And not in the sort of modern woke way, but it's okay to be confused. It is often the natural state of the human to feel paralyzed, to not know which direction to go, to genuinely want to do good and do what's right and be unsure what it is. And it is also human to make repeated mistakes and have to repent them. If we could somehow, it seems to me that our culture has become much more hostile through the state of being human, of being imperfect, of being broken, of making mistakes. We are all very, very afraid of being seen to be inadequate by other people, to be seen to be confused and uncertain. That's where virtue signaling comes from. We're terrified that we're going to lose our societal capital if we don't signal that we're good people. Here's an example. I think about a year ago, I said to my therapist, which is, in a sense, that's not all that it is, but part of what I get out of that is confession. There's an element of confession in the therapeutic relationship. And this flew out of my mouth. It accurately reflected what I was thinking, but it's a very immature thing that I was thinking. And I said, I don't remember what we were talking about, but I just said, how do I know? How can I be a good person? How do I know if I'm a good person? If I'm not, how can I get there? And because it was in the context of thoughts, and I was thinking in a very woke way, I was thinking that if I have the right thoughts and the right opinions, that's what makes me a good or bad person. I fell into that trap. And I blurt this out of my mouth, and he says, by doing good things and doing the right thing. And it was really obvious that what he was saying is you can't think yourself into this, right? I think we try to think ourselves into who we are rather than doing it. And I think we're afraid to do it because when you do something in the world, you can do it wrong and you don't want other people to see you making a mistake. There's something going on here with that, with our society.
Josh Slocum, Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up the conversation now. Got some stuff to do with the wife. What are you working on this year? How does 2025 look? I know we're already we're in Q2 now. So
yeah, what's
on the docket going forward?
Oh, it's the question I hate the most. I hate it from friends. I hate it from associates. And
come on,
what's your
gonna do a series?
No, I know. I don't know. We're gonna expand the show. We really do have the studio.
What do you mean, have correspondence, kind of like a daily show thing?
I don't know for sure. I know we're gonna add a live stream. We're gonna add an additional, probably weekly. We're going to add a live stream. I don't know if it's going to be Disaffected the show, but just live stream, or if it's going to be a slightly different take. We're talking about things I think I would like. I'm kind of curious. I wonder what feedback this will get, because we have some audience overlap. We're thinking about doing a live stream that's live advice giving. Short advice giving. It's not going to be, obviously it's not going to be like an hour-long consult that people book with me, but I get a lot of questions from people about how to deal with these traits and behaviors that I talk about so much on the show. And I'd love to have more direct interaction with listeners and readers, so people could either call in or text in or this sort of stuff and say, I've got this situation. I'd like to try our hand at that.
You haven't done that? You haven't done a live stream yet? But ask me anything? Or?
Not really. I mean, I think we did one or two because we were backed up against the corner and couldn't edit the show, but we haven't actually sat down and said, okay, every Thursday we're going to be live. We're going to be live streaming for an hour and a half. I think that's coming up soon.
Yeah. Kelly J. Keene has a Turf Talk Tuesday. You could have a
something
Friday
like that,
or something like
but
that.
Our brand, because I really enjoy. One of the things, anyway, you're wrapping up the show. We'll see what comes out here. I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you for having me on, Benjamin. I really appreciate it.
And your show Disaffected can be found on YouTube, or you say you're shadow banned? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can be found on there, but I suspect they're doing everything they can to make it algorithmically unpopular.
Yeah, okay. So, but you're on...
Disaffected's on YouTube. Yeah. It's on Rumble. It's a full video. It's a full hour. Last time it was an hour and 10 minutes. It's a fully produced show. It's not just a webcam. And it comes out 9:00 on Sundays, Rumble and YouTube. It also goes out in its audio form on all your regular podcast platforms. Yeah. It's also on X/Twitter.
Yeah, and you can be interacted with directly or in the quote tweets on Twitter too, X or whatever it's called.
Yeah. But I warn you, that's where I'm snappiest.
Yeah, so if somebody wants to get into a bitch slap fight with you, that's...
Want to get into a bitch fight with me, do it on Twitter.
Yeah, that's what it's made for. That's what it's there for. Josh Slocum, thank you very much for joining me again. It's always a pleasure.
Benjamin, please give Leslie my best.
I will, absolutely. There we